And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily here at the Upside Sports Network. And we got some breaking news this morning, fresh off the hot stove. Kyle Schwarber stays in Philadelphia, much like we all expected. 5 years, $150 million. He's been nothing but durable for the Philadelphia Phillies. Great get for them. We thought they were kind of in an intractable position from what their payroll was last year. Still pretty much the same this year. The only path forward for them right now is just bringing back their own guys at this point. Don't be surprised if they bring back Suarez as well. But the bigger news has to be the New York Mets ultimately losing out on their closer. Edwin Diaz has just agreed to a 3-year, $69 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'm sure there's some deferrals in there. But for the New York Mets, they brought in Devin Williams with the hope that they'd be able to retain Edwin Diaz and have a great 1-2 punch at the back end of their bullpen. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Diaz opted out of his contract this offseason of a 5-year, $100 million contract, had 3 years remaining on that deal. The reason why he opted out, because he wanted the exact same contract, that same length all over again. Here, he doesn't necessarily get the length, but an even higher average annual value. Now, we'll see what the present day value turns out to be after the contract with all the deferrals and all that kind of a thing. But 3 years, $69 million to go to the Dodgers, team that won back-to-back World Series and absolutely has needs in that bullpen that they've tried addressing each of the past 2 seasons unsuccessfulully, I might add. This could finally be the way that they get that position solved in that bullpen, to where they don't have to turn to a Glass now or a Yamamoto in the 9th inning. Doesn't mean that they don't still have that option on the table, but they once again go out and get the premium closer on the market. Last year, Tanner Scott. This year, Edwin Diaz. Hats off to the Los Angeles Dodgers, once again using their financial might and flexing it to get the best option on the market to solve their one quote-unquote deficiency on their roster. For the New York Mets, we talked about this possibly being an issue, that there were several teams that were still in on Edwin Diaz, not just the Dodgers, but also the Blue Jays. The Yankees had also kicked the tires, that he might not ultimately end up back in New York. Now this means they're probably going to have to go on to option number 2, 3, 4. Now that turns all eyes will now turn to Robert Suarez as probably the best closer on the market. I would expect him to still get heavy interest from the Toronto Blue Jays, but Luke Weaver is still out there. Could be another interesting find there. And we've seen an affinity from the New York Mets to sign previous employees, previous players of the New York Yankees. So could be a nice fit there. Yankees, of course, still have to fix their bullpen a little bit more. Bednar was a nice get for them at the deadline last year. He's got 1 year left on his contract, though, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them add another premium relief option this offseason. But the Dodgers are the talk of the winter meetings right now. Again, getting their guy in Edwin Diaz. This, of course, will boost their payroll even higher than where it already was. But just an incredible get for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Already one of the best teams in baseball that we've seen ever really be built. Obviously built through money, and we're going to have all the CBA discussions about will there be a salary cap, will the luxury tax thresholds or CBT taxes anyway really have an effect on a team like the Dodgers. And I believe there will eventually be some kind of ramifications for what's going on right now in Los Angeles. Do I think it will be a salary cap? I don't think the Players Association will have that. But this is certainly going to help add fuel to that fire from some of those smaller market teams. Now, were those smaller market teams going to sign Edwin Diaz? Were they going to sign Shohei Ohtani? No. But they could have been in the market for some of the other guys that they've been able to sign as a result of that deferred money. You look at Teoscar Hernandez, Edwin, Kirby Yates last year. A lot of these guys that probably would have been signing elsewhere because the money might not have been available, because the deferred money would now have been, or would have to have been paid up front, would have to have been paid like a normal contract. Obviously, that's not happening, but a very curious thing that's going to happen next year in the offseason is what's going to happen with that collective bargaining agreement. I think this signing is just only going to add fuel to that fire. But welcome in, everybody. Hank, welcome back. Justin, appreciate you joining us. It is absolute madness early this morning, 10 o'clock Central Time, 11 on the East Coast. Really curious to see what the next domino is to fall. I thought we might see some actual trade discussions today. Some actual trade discussions finally come to fruition. This I did not have on my bingo card today. I thought Edwin Diaz might sign quickly here. I didn't think it would be this quickly, but great on the Los Angeles Dodgers, moving quickly, getting their guy. I thought Schwarber ultimately was going to go back to the Philadelphia Phillies. I never really bought a team like the Pirates really being a threat to the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, the average annual value does surprise me a little bit. He's been nothing but consistent, I suppose, for the Philadelphia Phillies, is part of the reason why they decided to give him the length that they gave him. But for 5 years, for a guy that's a designated hitter, that doesn't necessarily hit for a high average, certainly a great on-base percentage guy, gives you the powers, the RBIs, the runs, all of those things. He's great at all those things. I'm not saying he's not a great player. But for $30 million, you better be certain he's going to continue to be available, which is what he has been his entire time in Philadelphia. Played over 150 games in each of his 4 seasons there in Philadelphia. He's been nothing but consistent as far as being able to get on base, 38 home runs every single season, 108 RBIs, I believe, every single season as well. He's been Mr. Consistent, but at 32 years old, this contract is going to end in his age 37 season. How exactly is a DH going to hold up with an average that's already plummeted? Now, that average has been down for the last couple of years, and he's kind of settled into this player who hits around 218, 220 on a good day, where he has a really high on-base percentage, works the count, doesn't necessarily strike out a whole lot, drives the ball to all fields. That type of player will have some success in the short term, but the length has got to be a little bit worrisome if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan. You look at their situation this offseason specifically. The reason why I thought the Philadelphia Phillies were going to bring him back all along was because of their financial situation. They're in all these big, long, deep contracts. They don't really have time to flex around their roster a little bit here. There's been consternation about Alec Boehm over there at third base. Could they bring in an Alex Bregman, possibly upgrade the roster there? I have been advocating pretty much this whole time that no, it's not really feasible because Bregman, while he would be an upgrade for them, they don't necessarily have the financial flexibility to do that. They don't have the might of the Los Angeles Dodgers to go out there and do something like this. The Dodgers are in a class all unto themselves financially. You look at teams like the Red Sox, like the Yankees, like the Philadelphia Phillies, teams that have higher payrolls, or you would expect to have higher payrolls. While they might have a $300 million payroll or something close to it, Phillies are already there. And so to bring in an outside contract like a Bregman to fill in there at third base to upgrade this roster never really seemed feasible. That's why the path coming back for Schwarber, for Suarez, and other free agents makes a lot more sense if you're in the camp of the Philadelphia Phillies, because then you already know what the team looks like. Sure, you're a good enough team to get into the postseason. You think you were really close to getting to the World Series a couple of seasons ago when the Arizona Diamondbacks unfortunately were able to beat you in the postseason. That was really the year to me that they missed the boat, that they missed their opportunity to win a World Series. They tried to run it back last year. Obviously, they had some mixed results. This year, I think they're going to do a little bit more of the same because, again, their financial situation dictates to them they can't really do a whole lot. And so that's why I thought Kyle Schwarber would probably end up back in Philadelphia, because that's their best move that they probably could make with the way their roster is currently set up, especially with their finances. Appreciate you joining us from France, man. Appreciate you. If Tanner Scott has the comeback year, then the Dodgers bullpen is fire. I would not rule out Tanner Scott being jettisoned from this roster. I think he would be a great setup guy. I would suppose that they would like to hold on to him if they wanted to, have a good 1-2 punch back into their bullpen. But I don't think they're necessarily sold on Tanner Scott getting back to that level of performance. You'd think, well, they just gave him a 4-year deal. Wouldn't they, feel comfortable with him through the entirety of that contract, or at least the first couple of years of that before they try to offload that salary? Well, this is the Los Angeles Dodgers. They view things very differently than other ball clubs. And if they can find a trade where another team is willing to take on that deal, where they can improve their roster in other ways, use that money in different ways, I think they would be open to something like that. But we'll see what happens. Should be a very interesting day here at the Upside. We're going to be live if anything does break. Diaz deal, according to John Heyman, 3 years, $69 million. A record for a closer. Absolutely, it is. Let's see if we can catch up on a couple of these other comments from you guys. He's a Dodger. Yes, he is. Upside. Did you see the reports apparently that this is according to a lot of people who cover the Marlins that their top target is third baseman Suarez? That'd be an interesting get for you guys. They do need to upgrade their offense, but I think there's going to be tougher competition from some of these bigger markets that are still in contention for at least wild card. I don't think the Marlins are quite there yet. Talk to me next year as far as a price tag that high for a player. I just don't think the Marlins are going to step out this far. After all, we talked about this with Nick Castellanos a couple years ago, and that's part of the reason why Derek Jeter left that ownership front office group there in Miami, was because of the inability to sign big ticket free agents, and that was Nick Castellanos, who I believe got at the time 5 for 100 or 4 for 80, somewhere around there. It was a $20 million average annual value anyway. But Eugenio Suarez is going to command a little bit north of that. Shorter term deal, I'd imagine probably a 3-year deal. I just don't think the Marlins are quite in that pool as of yet. Nando, welcome in. If Tanner Scott has a comeback here, then the Dodgers bullpen is fire. I do agree, but again, I still wonder about them wanting to bring him back once again. Can the Yankees pick up an infielder, a good one, or Dodgers take them all? The Yankees will be able to add an infielder. The question will be, do they do it via trade, like a Corey Seager, big aircraft carrier type? Do they go after Bellinger, who is their own free agent? Do they bring back Goldschmidt? I still think there's an outside chance they bring in Murakami over there at third base, but we shall see. Who's the best third base target that Miami can get the power they have without needing to break the bank? For third base, I would guess probably the trade route would be the way I would go. Pardon me. I think Nolan Arenado is pretty much stuck either taking the best offer from a team willing to play him at that position. If the Marlins are the team that comes calling, he may have to waive us no trade and say, hey, I'll be willing to go there just to change things up. Obviously, Cardinals would have to eat a whole bunch of salary. Would the Marlins even want Arenado? I doubt. But that, to me, would be an option. Other options to me would be guys like Josh Young, if they're able to swing a trade between those two teams. Wouldn't be the piece I would go after if I'm the Marlins. I'd be looking for better talent in return for some of my top pitching arms on the market like Cabrera or Alcantara. But that would be one option for them over there at third base. Riley, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us once again. Will the Rockies do anything? Maybe dump Bryant? There's no way they're going to be able to dump Chris Bryant. There's not a taker for that contract. Now, the only way I could see them even, trying to improve this offseason would be trying to jettison some of their good players on this roster and just trying to build for the future. Now, that's the song and dance they've been selling to Rockies fans for basically the last, 6-7 years at this point now. This has been a rebuilding situation that just seems unending there in Colorado, but a change in the front office, a change pretty much all over there in Colorado, hopefully will bring about better results. We shall see. Stanley, will the Mets acquire starting pitching? Well, it seems like they're a little bit tepid on some of the top-end starters. To me, they have to add at least 2 top-end starters, and it sounds like they're not willing to go the length of some of these deals that might be required for a guy like Framber Valdez, that would have been required for a Dylan Cease, or any of those top arms. It sounds like what they would prefer is 1 or 2 year deals. Surprise, surprise, David Stearns doesn't want to spend multi-year deals on starting pitching. But he's now the general manager of the New York Mets. He can't sit around and just twiddle his thumbs and say, I don't want to pay these big ticket items. They don't necessarily work out in years 4, 5, and 6. You're now in charge of the moves that the New York Mets make. It's time to put your big boy pants on and get one of those elite starting pitchers. Now, whether you identify that to be Framber Valdez on the free agent market, the trade market being Joe Ryan, whether you decide to go after another name that we haven't talked about with the New York Mets before, you cannot entrust this rotation to a bunch of 1-year deals, to a bunch of kids who haven't really proven it at the big league level yet. You think they can do it, but they haven't proven it yet. and failed options from last year in Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga. This is a rotation that's in need of an upgrade. Could they improve the lineup? Absolutely. Is there a conversation about Pete Alonso, what they're going to do in the outfield, possibly with Kyle Tucker, what they could do at third base with Vientos or a Bregman? Absolutely. But their biggest need still remains that starting rotation. Until they address that, this is an incomplete offseason for the New York Mets. And until they add some long-term, top-grade starting pitching, an ace, a number two, something along those lines, at least a couple of starters that could really jettison this team to the top of the division, maybe even get them to a World Series contention once again. Last year, we really saw the deficiencies that starting rotation had, the limitations that roster had because of that starting rotation. And until they solve that, this team can go no further than what they did last year. So we shall see. Anthony, I did a trade where I sent Liam Hendricks, Cabrera, and Fulcher to the Reds. That'd be interesting. I could see that happening as far as Cabrera helping out that rotation a little bit. Not sure about the Hicks fit with the Reds anyway, but we shall see. All right, let's check in a couple of headlines anyway around Major League Baseball, just see if anything else is breaking at the moment. Let me update my page here. Dave Roberts yesterday afternoon. I think that getting a high leverage reliever is never a bad thing. The Dodgers on Tuesday morning signed the top closer available, Edwin Diaz. No kidding. Good morning, Johnny. Appreciate you joining us. If you guys are new here, be sure to hit that like, subscribe. I told you guys, if anything breaks, we will be live for you guys, and here we are. Master Vinman, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us once again. Thank you for those likes. Appreciate that. There's Edwin Diaz. I like that picture of him. That's a good one. Trying to see if there's any deferred money in either of those deals. That's the one thing I'm kind of curious about. One other bit of news from this morning, the Philadelphia Phillies, not only did they sign Kyle Schwarber to that 5-year deal, they have now extended manager Rob Thompson through the 27th season. So basically he won't be a lame duck manager this year. I think there's a world in which Rob Thompson loses his job next year, and that that last year that we're getting in this deal is basically just a kind of a thank you for your service kind of a thing. If the Philadelphia Phillies don't get where they're wanting to go, we could see Rob Thompson out. Let's see, Anthony. For me, I think there's a good move for the Dodgers because actually it moves Tanner Scott back to his strongest spot in the bullpen as a setup guy. I would agree in that respect, but I'm not sure that they would want to. I think that there are other options that they would feel more comfortable with after the struggles he had last year with the Dodgers. Larry, welcome in. Do you think the Yankees will trade for Tatis? That'd be one heck of a trade. There have been some rumblings about the Padres doing something massive. That would certainly qualify. Do I think that's overly likely? I would put it at less than a 1% chance. But we've seen some strange things, stranger things in the world of baseball. Have you heard anything about the Astros trading today? Basically just updates on the Shane Baz story is that the talks between the two sides aren't necessarily anywhere close, that they were kind of just exchanging the idea of what a Shane Baz trade to the Astros would look like. We saw some rumors last night about Jake Myers. Nothing new on the Jake Myers front there. Haven't heard anything either on the Christian Walker front. I know there was some rumblings on the kickoff show about Christian Walker possibly being a guy that could be moved after a struggle in his first season anyway with the Astros, and maybe wanting to do something different over there at first base. But as of right now, nothing overly massive. The biggest moves of the day so far, clearly Edwin Diaz, 3 for 69 to the Dodgers, 5 for 150, Schwarber back to Philadelphia, and Thompson staying as manager one more season anyway with the Philadelphia Phillies. Any Cubs moves? Not as of yet. I do think we're going to get some actual trade talk today. Do not be surprised if we see a couple of bigger trades today. After all the trade talk we saw yesterday, I expect a couple of those deals to come to fruition. Don't be surprised if we see a C.J. Abrams deal sometime in the next 24 hours. I do think his market is probably further along than a lot of these other conversations as far as trade talk as well. So kind of keep your eyes on the Washington Nationals over the next 24 hours for some trades. Mackenzie Gore, I think that talk will probably be on hold until some of these bigger free agents sign, because if the Nationals do sign some of those guys, I doubt Mackenzie Gore will be traded at that point. I don't think the same thing for C.J. Abrams. I think the two are not mutually exclusive. Anthony, I said this upside. I'm not sure if you agree with this. More likely to get traded by the Padres if they trade someone not named Fernando Tatis. It's Manny Machado because Fernando is younger. I mean, I would obviously prefer to hold on to Fernando Tatis as well. He's on a better contract, younger, all those kinds of things. Tanner Scott available? I would absolutely agree. I think he is certainly available. The trade that we made yesterday, the speculative trade that we made, sending Corey Seager to the Dodgers in exchange for Tanner Scott as part of the salary ballast, some cash going back to the Dodgers as well to offer, or to at least be the deferred part of the Seager deal for the next couple of seasons, and then getting a top prospect from the Dodgers. I think that has now moved from, say, like a 0.5% chance to now maybe like a 3 or 4% chance of happening because they now have their proven closer at the back end with Edwin Diaz, top closer in the game, top closer on the market. They get him once again. We saw that last year with them bringing in Tanner Scott. Now, they have several options currently already on their payroll. I think they're going to remodel that bullpen a little bit this offseason. In order to make room for these guys, I think they're going to have to jettison one or two of those players, and this would be the most lengthy contract that they could get rid of in a deal. I think one poor year from Tanner Scott does not necessarily diminish his value too far to where other teams would be scared off completely from bringing him in. So we shall see. He's not like Chris Bryant anyway from the Rockies where there's literally no reason to bring him on. There's no benefit. There's nothing the Rockies can offer you. There's literally no possible way Chris Bryant is moving from the Rockies. So we shall see. I think the only way Chris Bryant would actually move, by the way, would be if they just flat out cut him, a la Josh Hamilton with the Los Angeles Angels, and I just don't see that happening either. What's next for the Dodgers? I think there's a good chance that the Dodgers are going to continue to try to address that bullpen. Do not be surprised if they're in there for Luke Weaver, among other names. Robert Suarez, I think, is still not out of the question for the Los Angeles Dodgers to bring in. Suarez to the Mets next. I think that's possible. I think the Toronto Blue Jays are more likely. But I do think that Luke Weaver or Suarez or somebody in that 8th, 9th inning role will be coming to the New York Mets sometime this offseason. At the winter meetings, I doubt. I think the market is going to have to adjust a little bit here to the Edwin Diaz signing. I would give it at least 24 hours until we see another massive reliever sign. But we've seen strange things happen. We didn't exactly expect this, news right off the rip here Tuesday morning. But we're still expecting some movement here as well. Thoughts on Michael King to the Cubs starting rotation? I would like that as well. I think that's the type of player I think both the Baltimore Orioles and Chicago Cubs will be targeting. Kind of that 3-4 year contract, the $20 to $25 million starting pitcher. Not necessarily at the top end like a $30 million guy to me and Framber Valdez. That kind of fits in that range. I think that's the upper end of the Chicago Cubs range, however. I would say that more likely would be 1 or 2 year deals. Tyler Mahle, among others, would make more sense, at least with what the front office has done in years past with the Chicago Cubs. We saw how going all in last year ultimately did not work out and cost them the future of Cam Smith, and Kyle Tucker's leaving in free agency, and you're stuck where you are now after the Kyle Tucker situation. Paredes is no longer on the roster. I thought the move to bring him in at the trade deadline was work of genius, and the move to bring in Kyle Tucker, while it was short-sighted, they had to do what they had to do to bring him in. It was an all-or-nothing kind of a play, and they ended up with a bag of magic beans. It didn't work out. And so Chicago needs to move forward from here. I think they'll address their infield situation by bringing in some type of a bat. I think Eugenio Suarez, to me, makes a lot of sense. But they ran short of starting pitching. That was their issue last year. And I think they need to add a couple of starters this year. We shall see who they bring in. The health of Steele will be a factor this season as well. And then, of course, the 1 year deal that they have with Imanaga after he agreed to the qualifying offer is something they need to consider as well. Gary, welcome in. Appreciate you joining us. Sermon, welcome back. Let's see here. Try to catch up on a few of these comments here. Nobody will want Tanner Scott as closer. I would take him as a fan of the Texas Rangers. I will let him be my closer. Why? Because I literally don't have a bullpen right now. So there will be teams out there that still view Tanner Scott as a closer. Maybe they think that the pressure situation of the Dodgers, maybe it might have been too much for him. Of course, you don't necessarily want to say that about your closer, but when you're desperate for some relief pitching, Tanner Scott, you say, hey, maybe it's just 1 year aberration. Maybe it wasn't even the market. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe just a change of scenery. You can talk yourself into all kinds of other arguments why to bring him in. There are going to be teams that ask about Tanner Scott now that Edwin Diaz is a member of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Upside, what are your thoughts on Sandy to the Dodgers? I still don't necessarily think it's overly likely. I think other teams that have needs for starting pitching will pursue him first. To me, a team like the Chicago Cubs makes a lot of sense right now for Sandy Alcantara. Padres make a lot of sense. But those would be the types of teams I could see going after Sandy Alcantara. I doubt the Mets just because it's in the division. But I would say Cubs, Padres, teams along those lines make a lot of sense. Let's see here. Gary, MLB sucks. Hopefully, after the CBA next year, we can fix it and set up two leagues that have and have nots. Well, we're not going to have two leagues, obviously, but I do think the CBA will do quite a bit to curtail what the Dodgers have done over the past 3 years. I think that the deferred money absolutely will be shut down. I think they might still allow deferred money, but they might cap it at, say, like $100 million. Well, just with the Shohei Ohtani deal, they would have blown well past that. I think that's a very likely outcome in the CBA. I do not think a salary cap will happen. I think there's a good chance that the owners will try to pursue it, add more fuel to the fire, like I said, with this Edwin Diaz signing to the Dodgers, to try to convince other small market teams to try to push for this. But I don't think the Players Association will ever agree to it. And so there's a very high likelihood we do not see baseball in 27 as a result. But we shall see. I think that the CBA will be tweaked quite a bit to curtail what the Dodgers have done, the deferred money, but also in terms of the collective bargaining agreement as far as the CBT tax. I think we see a lot of what the success the NBA has done with having a first and second apron, and how well that has worked for them. Granted, it's a salary cap league, but there's nothing to say that you couldn't do something similar with the with the luxury taxes that they have, with the collective bargaining tax. Make it so egregious to where for every $1 million that you go over a certain threshold, you have to spend another $999 million in tax. That essentially would work as a salary cap, but make it at a level to where it's absurd. Like say a payroll of $500 million. Deferred money all counts still towards your current evaluation of what your roster is. It doesn't necessarily just go on to next year's cap sheet. It still counts for that season because he's still on your roster that season. Now you're still financially liable for that years down the road. And that's something your owner's going to have to pay for. But as far as working in the confines of the CBA, your salary should still count for that season. We see the NHL kind of closed a loophole this year with the LTIR. For years, it had been an issue where a team would put on, there was a lot of argument last year about how the Dallas Stars took advantage of it with Miro Heiskanen and Tyler Seguin, were able to bring in Mikko Rantanen and others because of the LTIR rules. Well, that changed. I still think the Stars did nothing wrong. They worked within the confines of the rules. They did what they could, and the injuries were legitimate. There was nothing about their injuries that was hocus pocus to make their salary structure work a little bit better. But in hockey, the way it worked is if you had a player go on LTIR, and as long as they finished the season on LTIR, you could bring them back for game one of the playoffs, and they would still, or your salary structure would be fine. You'd also get the added benefit that that player's salary, you could then use that player's salary or the amount of that salary to bring in other talent. I think that the way NHL now does it is to where they close the loophole is now that salary doesn't come off the books. The only way it comes off your books to where you can bring in outside talent as an emergency, injury basis is if they are truly season ending, meaning you can't bring them back for the postseason anymore. So the salary cap still functions as a legitimate salary cap, not just teams just trying to finagle their way around an injury situation. In Major League Baseball, I think they're going to find a way to close the loopholes that the Dodgers have found, and we're going to see quite a few different ideas presented on how to do that. I think the salary cap is probably the most draconian measure that they could take to try to solve it, and I think it's not going to happen. There are a million other measures that they could utilize until then, and I think that's what the Players Association is going to advocate for, doing that and being able to solve those issues. Let's see here. Try to catch up on a few more of these comments here. Morgan, welcome back. Appreciate you joining us. Who want Tucker and Bo and Bellinger to the Blue Jays? I don't think you're getting all three. In fact, I doubt you get all. I think I would doubt getting two of those guys. I don't think Bellinger is overly likely. Bo Bichette, to me, I think is going to find his payday elsewhere. I still think the Nationals are going to be the suitor for him probably in late January. But as far as Kyle Tucker, I think that the Blue Jays are right there for him. There's been some rumblings about them being able to sign both Tucker and Suarez. For me, I don't see that necessarily as the issue there. I still think they could possibly do both. But we shall see. I don't think they're going to get Bo Bichette and Bellinger, though. I do think if the market doesn't necessarily work in their favor as far as Kyle Tucker, and they do bring back Suarez, or do bring in Suarez, I think there's an outside chance Bo Bichette could find his way back to Toronto, but Bellinger, I think, is probably going to end up in a different market. Jock and Osuna for Scott. Not going to happen. I don't think Jock Peterson is a fit for what the Dodgers are looking to do. I think he just takes up roster spot, honestly, for that Dodgers team. That's not necessarily what they're looking to do. Would Brendan Donovan be a good fit on the Dodgers? Brendan Donovan would be a great fit literally anywhere. I think he's really one of the Swiss Army knives of this offseason. I think Luis Arraez kind of fits in that same mold, but I think Donovan has a little bit more power and is a little bit better player overall. But just kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guy with 2 or 3 years left of control with Donovan, I can't remember. I want to say it's 2, but and then Arraez on free agency. Depends on which player you value more. To me, Donovan is the consummate professional. Would be great in pretty much any market. Arraez just depends on what you're looking for in a player. Are you comfortable with the lack of base stealing ability, with the adequate but not great glove, with the zero power? Those are kind of his negatives. The positives are high contact rate, does get on base quite a bit, walks a fair amount, and doesn't strike out a whole lot. Those are the positives there. He's not going to cost you a whole heck of a lot because a player like this does not come on the market at all. I mean, we're basically talking back to the days of Tony Gwynn for this type of a player. Mark Grace even. But Mark Grace, to me, had more power. Luis Arraez is probably going to command a 2 or 3 year deal in that $10 to $15 million range. Just depends on what type of player you really value here. The question is, do these teams have great hitting prospects that the Marlins need that might be ready because they're changing their philosophy when it comes to hitting? They want older college guys. To me, the Marlins just need to continue to get better. Whichever way they do it, whichever philosophy they want to follow, to me, the offense still remains the issue. However they want to go about doing so is what they should do. That's what they should target in return for guys like Cabrera, guys like Alcantara, and others. Sermon, Vegas was the culprit of LTIR, not Dallas. Vegas did it all the time. True, there was some talk about Dallas, though, last year. A lot of the national media types in Canada specifically were talking about it. To me, Dallas's injuries were absolutely legitimate. I mean, Heiskanen didn't even get suit up until, the conference final last year, or something along those lines. I know he missed the first round of the playoffs. Sagan, he didn't even count towards the LTIR ability as well, because he actually returned with the final couple of games of the season, so the Stars couldn't even take advantage of that money. So, to me, Vegas, the Panthers, among others, had utilized that to their advantage in years past, but Vegas was certainly the biggest culprit of that. Mark Stone, what's the other guy's name? Petrangelo, others. All right, the main 2 teams that have targeted when it comes to long-term injury reserve in the NHL's players, it was the Panthers and Lightning. I forgot about the Lightning. The Lightning did do that a couple of different times. Master Vidman, and the Cubs get a starting pitcher with Steele, Horton, Imanaga, and Boyd. Does Tyone become trade bait? I think he's already been trade bait for at the trade deadline. There was some conversation about his fit on the team. Not necessarily offers or teams necessarily asking for him, but I think he would be the odd man out in that situation. Also, do you keep Imanaga even though he's on that qualifying offer? Those would be the questions I would have. They need to get long-term answers in that starting staff. If you look at that rotation you just mentioned, the young guys are really the guys you're counting on out of that staff there. And to me, Tyone would be the guy that would become trade bait. I could see any number of teams going after him. I'd say the Padres, to me, would make some sense just because they need a number of starters there with the loss of King, with the loss of Cease, and others. Diamondbacks would be another team that I would check in on because of Gallen going out. Possibly Merrill Kelly coming back is a possibility, but if they don't bring him back, Tyone would make some sense. Joe, welcome in. You knew Diaz was going to LA. Now they can focus on Skubal. Well, I mean, the Dodgers do seem to get everybody they want. They have the prospects to do it, but I just don't think the Tigers are necessarily open to doing that. They talked about always listening, that they don't necessarily view anybody as an untouchable, but let's be real here. Skubal is the one real player they have that would give them a real chance to win this year. Now, one other bit of news I heard this morning on Alex Bregman is that the Tigers are lukewarm on him at best. That coming from John Heyman. Basically, that the Tigers were one of the finalists for him last year. They likely will not be that this year. The one team that I keep hearing for Alex Bregman is the Chicago Cubs, that they will wait and wait and wait and wait until that final bell on Alex Bregman tells me there is at least one team willing to give him another long-term deal. How long-term remains to be seen. Is it a 3-year deal with opt-outs? Is it a 4-year deal with a higher AAV? Is it a 6 or 7-year deal like the numbers he was looking for last year? Remains to be seen, but the Cubs are adamant about upgrading their offense over there at third base. I think Bregman is their pie in the sky, their number one target. I think they'll ultimately end up having to settle for a guy like Eugenio Suarez or somebody along those lines. But Bregman certainly seems to be their top target here. The younger guys might be time to call him Thomas White and Robbie Snelling. I mean, to me, I'd be using those guys for trade assets. Does a team like Seattle make sense for Alex Bregman? No. They don't necessarily have the finances to be able to do it, especially after being able to retain Josh Naylor. Now, to me, they still need to figure out what they're going to do, at third base to kind of replace Suarez, to replace Polanco. I do think they will add somebody there. To me, a guy like Willie Castro makes some sense, a lower cost option, or maybe even going the trade route. But I doubt we see the return of Suarez back to Seattle. I certainly doubt Alex Bregman going there as well. Johnny, Dodgers probably put together an unbelievable amount of players for Skubal that would be too good to turn down. I'm not saying that they couldn't do it. I mean, at a certain point, the Tigers would even say yes to a Godfather offer. I mean, if you look at their top prospects, let me pull it up right here. I mean, if you come to the Tigers and say we'll give you DePaula, Hope, Quintero, Sirota, Ferris, Morales, I don't see how the Tigers say no to that type of a deal. That's probably double what Skubal is worth, and he's only got 1 year left on his deal. And by the way, you don't have to pay him next year. So if they offered something like that, of course they're going to say yes. But to me, I just think a real world solution for Skubal is they hold on to him this year. You're going to hear nothing about but buzz about him possibly being a trade target at the deadline. Ultimately, I think the Tigers hold on to him and get him signed long term because they have the money to be able to get that done. I think that's part of why they didn't sign guys long term last year. I think they understand that they're going to have some money coming off the books with Torres next year, qualifying offer he accepted this year. That's going to be coming off their books. They're going to have the finances to be able to retain Skubal, and I think they'll put every dime they can on the table in an effort to try to keep him. I'm sure the big markets will try to lure him. I'm sure we'll see articles about the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mets, the Blue Jays. Even the Rangers will probably have money freed up at that time for Tarek Skubal. I'm sure we'll hear dark horses like the Giants, the Nationals, the Diamondbacks, the Dodgers, of course, are in on everything, the Padres. But I think ultimately Skubal will remain in Detroit the next season. Until I see something different, I just think that's the way it's ultimately going to go down. You've read the first comment above. Was Robbie starting to understand what I was saying? Let's see here. The question is, do the teams have a great hitting prospect that the Marlins need that might be ready because they're changing philosophy when it comes to hitters in college? I don't see what that has to do with Thomas White, though. Pete Alonso back to the Mets seems obvious now. I still wouldn't say that's obvious. I still think there's a world in which Pete Alonso goes to a team like Boston. I think he could go to Baltimore. I think Cincinnati. I think the Giants could make some sense here. I don't think it's a fait accompli. Now, I do think that they're going to spend in that bullpen. I do think they will add a bat, whether that be a Bregman, a Murakami, an Alonso, a Tucker, remains to be seen. But they will add a significant bat. Alonso could be that guy, but I just think he's going to have to wait after almost all of those other guys sign. I think he's probably the last on the totem pole, and I think Alonso's not going to wait around like he did last year. I don't think it's Mets or bust for Pete Alonso. What are your thoughts on this trade? Sandy to the Dodgers for Morales, Quintero, and Tibbs. Ugh. If I'm the Dodgers, I say hell no. Like, hell no. Like, Quintero to me would be untouchable in a Sandy Alcantara trade. Morales might be the peak of what I would be willing to offer. Tibbs, maybe. But I'm not touching any of this top five for Sandy Alcantara. I'm probably not touching Ferris as well. And Morales might be the peak of it, but you probably have to throw in another piece along with it or an extension of sorts for Alcantara. But straight up, I still would have my questions as to whether or not it was worth it. All right, let's check out X, see if anything else is happening this morning, since apparently Major League Baseball decided to wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, all right, get down to business. go to our list here just to see if anything on our baseball, and then we'll check out our MLB trade rumors. Mets listening to offers for David Peterson, one of their most consistent performers last year on the pitching side. Just, what are they doing? Maybe they don't view him as a top of the rotation starter, so they want to clear out the bottom of the rotation for those young guys. I guess that would be the thought process there. But I mean, you need innings, and he was one of the few guys who was able to give you that. I don't know about that. Doesn't look like anything else at the moment. Let's head over to MLB trade rumors, see if anything else is popping off today. The 5-year deal we just talked about. Yeah, busy morning anyway. We finally got the keg cracked open, if you will, yesterday with the Diamondbacks starting the winter meetings by signing Mike Soroka. We got the signing anyway from the Rays of Steven Matz, and then this morning all the big boys are going here. Mackenzie Gore to the Braves, Cubs, or somewhere else. That would make some sense, but again, I think Mackenzie Gore's move is probably going to have to wait until probably January after the big boys do sign, because I do believe there's a good chance the Nationals add big players this offseason. This is the year they were really targeting to try to add to their roster. They thought they were trying to build up last year with the trade of bringing in Nathaniel Lowe. Obviously, that didn't work out, but it was seen as a stopgap move until they spent big in free agency this season. Well, now's this year where they finally have their answer on whether or not some of these younger guys are going to be long-term assets for them going forward. Are they going to make or break this roster? I don't think they're going to go through another year of that. I think this is the year they're finally going to go out there and spend a lot of their money. A lot of their long-term commitments are now off the books. They have been very friendly with Scott Boras in the past, signing guys late into January, even February in years past, and I think we'll get that once again. I do think there's a chance that we could see one of those guys actually sign at the winter meetings, because the Nationals aren't afraid to go out there and spend early in free agency. So we'll see, but I do think there's a good chance the Nationals upgrade here that in a way that makes Mackenzie Gore unavailable via trade. Now, C.J. Abrams, I think, could still be on the move anyway, even if they did bring in someone. But I like the teams that you mentioned there, Braves and Cubs, for Mackenzie Gore. Upside, is it more likely to stay? Who's more likely to stay, Sandy or Edward, even though both are in the trade rumors? Sandy because he's a mentor. I would agree. I think Cabrera has more value on the market right now, so I would say he's probably the more likely to go. I think he's got more length on his contract as well by a year, because I like Perez as a Marlins fan, but I don't think he's ready to be an ace or number one right now behind Sandy as number two for 2 more seasons. I think Perez is probably your number one right now. I think you don't treat him like it. I think you still put him at the 2 and say Sandy are the one, so you don't have that pressure on him. But then it's clear by the end of May who the real number 1 in that rotation is, and that's going to be Perez if you're a Marlins fan. All right, appreciate you guys joining us for an early morning edition of MLB MLB Hot Stove Daily. Really do appreciate you guys joining us for some of the bigger news that we saw today. Remember to join us tonight at 9 o'clock as we break down all the latest from the winter meetings. But just had to get this live out there with Edwin Diaz going to the Dodgers, Schwarber going back to Philadelphia. I expect the market to try to settle down here for the next hour or two, and then for us to finally get some big trade talks really get going again. But what a nice start here to day 2 of the winter meetings. We'll see if there's anything big that happens today. If there is, we will go live again. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Sonic, any Cleveland rumors? I did hear at the beginning of the winter meetings, on our kickoff show, we mentioned the possibility of Steven Kwan being moved, how the Dodgers were the team that was targeting both a back-end reliever like Clase and Steven Kwan at the deadline. Ultimately, that did not happen, even though it got very close, according to several reports. Clase, obviously, persona non grata right now, but it sounds like Steven Kwan's name is still out there in the rumor mill. I would not be surprised if we do see him get moved. Dodgers, to me, still seem like the heavy favorite there. Don't be surprised if the Mets are the team that gets him. The Phillies have also inquired about him as well. Those would be the teams I'd be looking at first. But he's a really good player, high contact guy, left fielder, still a decent fielder, maybe a little bit above average from what I remember. But Steven Kwan, I think, would be the guy that you're looking for. If you're looking at the Cleveland Guardians rumors, he would be the guy I would be looking at as far as who could be jettisoned from that roster. Now, last offseason at this time, we were talking about them possibly making one big splashy move. Instead, it turned out them moving on from Josh Naylor and bringing in Carlos Santana, and we were led a little astray. I don't think we'll have those same rumors this year. I think we recognize who the Guardians are, who they've always been. They're not going to spend at the top of the market. They're not going to be bringing in Pete Alonso, Kyle Tucker, or any of those other top names. Now, they might still add some nice arms to this roster. I still think they could be a nice fit for Lucas Giolito or another arm along those lines. A one-year stopgap guy like a Tyler Mahle, somebody who's trying to rebuild their value, could make some sense there as well. But I don't think they're necessarily going to play on any of these big contracts. Michael King seems a little bit out of their budget. So as far as Guardians rumors, I would say, Stephen Kwan's where I'm keeping my eyes on right now to see if and when he gets moved. Dodgers, to me, still seem like the heavy favorite to bring him in because they just like, if they target somebody, they somehow find a way to get it done. And as you saw with the Dodgers prospects, they can basically put together any type of package that the Guardians would want and be able to get the deal done. The question is, will they and do they identify Kwan as that missing piece in their outfield mix? One more big question. How long do you think Kyle Schwarber can keep swinging the bat? Great question. That was my worry here with the 5-year length on this deal for the Philadelphia Phillies. He's been Mr. Consistent for Philadelphia, though. Low average, high walks, high on-base percentage. Does give you 38 home runs plus. Does give you 100-plus RBIs every single season. And he's available. 150 games each of the last 4 years. Has only been on the injured list once. And that was the minimum amount of time not this past season, but the season before in 2024 with a hamstring injury. That being said, I still think he's going to be very durable for the next couple of seasons. So mark off his age 33, 34 seasons as he's going to be there. Age 35, I still think we're going to see him in the lineup. I think we're going to start to see issues with health start to crop up. Age 36, year 4 of this deal, I have my doubts as far as whether it's worth the $30 million. Year 5, I don't think is anywhere near going to be the production that we see now. Now, the power, I think, will still be there. But I think the swing and miss will increase. I think the walks will decrease. I think the power numbers, while they're still going to be good, I don't think he's going to be hitting 38 home runs at that point. So do I think this contract will age great? No. But I do think the next couple of years is really what it's about for Philadelphia. Because like I said, this roster with the financial situation they're in is really inflexible. And so that's why they're going to bring back their own guys. They might tinker around the edges like they did with Kepler last year, Luzardo. But I don't see any other way for them to bring in a high-ticket item like a Bregman some fans have been clamoring for. I don't see them moving on from Alec Boehm. But as far as Schwarber's deal, I think the next couple of years are going to be the best years. Year 3, you'll start to see some signs of decline or health issues. Year 4, we'll certainly start to see some. And year 5 absolutely won't be worth it. But as far as the deal overall, great for the player. He's really fit into that clubhouse really, really well. We saw him come up with the Chicago Cubs. We thought he'd be one of the next great hitters, a Major League Baseball high average guy at that time. Obviously, he's no longer that. He's kind of changed his approach at the plate and fine-tuned it to what it is now, to where he's a bit of an on-base machine, still gives you a lot of power, and that player is still very productive in today's game. But I just don't think that's necessarily going to age very well as the strikeout rate's going to tick up, on-base percentage is going to drop, walks will drop, and that's when you'll start to see that deal become a bit of an albatross in years 4 and 5 for the Philadelphia Phillies. All right, appreciate you guys joining us. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. We'll be back live this evening around 9 o'clock. If there is any other big news, we will be live for you guys here. So be sure to check out the short video that we posted to let you guys know we were coming live. Hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys this evening at 9 o'clock. Y'all have a great one out there, everybody.